What's up, guys? I'm Josh Pate. That's Steve Wiltfong, weekly Wiltfong recruiting Whiparound. We're going to recruit this thing and whip it around coast to coast, Steve. I'm going to East Lansing this weekend. I'm already dressed for it. I'm ready for the rainy, gloomy 45-degree conditions, but it's also possibly the biggest game in the country. So we got Michigan rolling into East Lansing, Michigan State and Mel Tucker. Okay, they're on everyone's radar. I've talked about them an inordinate amount on Late Kick, but now we got to talk about recruiting. I know they got some big names coming in there this weekend. But another big name is Mel Tucker. And there are a lot of people, as you know, down south that keep beating the drum of Mel Tucker and LSU. So here's what I want to ask you. Of course, if you've heard anything, then let us know now. But secondly, let's just say in a hypothetical world that Mel Tucker is a legitimate candidate there. How do you see all this stuff balancing out right now? How do you handle it if you're Mel Tucker and people are asking you the questions? And in the recruiting world, how do you think, theoretically, again, he would transition to maybe taking that job?
Well, I think LSU is a job that's hard to say no to, right? If you're Mel Tucker or almost any other coach in college football, it's a place that won a national title a couple of years ago. Fertile in-state recruiting grounds where you can land future NFL talent, difference makers on your team. And then you're in the premier conference in college football right now that not only has the most national champions in recent memory, but also by far the most NFL draft picks. It's the premier league in college football. But for Mel Tucker, you have a big opportunity on Saturday in East Lansing to beat number 6 Michigan. You're number 8. You're undefeated. Michigan State has been to the college football playoff, Josh. It has happened before recently, which means it can happen again. They're tracking for that. This is a big game against the Wolverines at home, and they're going to do so in front of a big group of prospects. 2 of them are 5 stars. Well, one of them for sure is a 5-star, Keontae Goodwin. The other, Harold Perkins, I haven't nailed down that he's coming for sure, but his family tells me that the visit is in the works. The linebacker out of Texas, those are 2 guys that are being recruited by every school in the country. Those are guys that, Mel Tucker's building a rapport with, Josh. And so you got Keontae Goodwin. He's currently committed to Kentucky, took his official visit to took an official visit to Alabama last weekend, may return to Alabama in December. I expect him to return to Alabama in December. Also visited Alabama in the summer. Now he's going to get back to Kentucky for the Tennessee game for his official. He's been to Kentucky for several games already this fall and certainly loves Big Blue Nation. But I think he's got a keen eye on Alabama. I think Michigan State has a chance to make an impression here. He's going to visit Michigan later in the fall. And he's had a long-standing relationship with Mel Tucker. And Mel Tucker, I think he's a guy that if he moves somewhere, he's a guy that Keontae Goodwin would certainly continue to, consider. And Harold Perkins is obviously a top target on the board for LSU. Michigan State has offered this week and a visit quickly in the works. Michigan State trying to make a move on LSU, trying to make a move on Texas A&M, trying to make a move on Texas. And talking to Harold Perkins' family, the play of Michigan State's team really stood out to his uncle, Alvin Walton, and talking about the coaching staff. It's really impressive how they turned that program around in such a short period of time. So 2 blue chippers coming in. Michigan State has the number 17 recruiting class in the country right now. So Mel Tucker showing his recruiting chops there. That's one of the better Michigan State recruiting classes that I've seen in my 11 years at 24/7 Sports to date. And they're not done as they swing at a couple big fish. Going to be a lot of nice young players on campus. Caleb Presley out from Brandon Huffman's neck of the woods in Washington State is expected. Joshua Mickens from the great state of Indiana, returning, a 4-star edge rusher who was at Michigan State earlier this year. Jalen Thompson's a local 4-star from Detroit. I think that's not local, but it's in state. CJ Carr is a 4-star quarterback from in-state, having a terrific sophomore year. Nick Marsh, a 4-star 2024 receiver. So they're getting ahead on some guys. Other offered guys, Cole Dellinger, Kedrick Riscano, a running back from Texas, Jonathan Slack from Detroit King, Dylan Senda, an offensive lineman from Divine Child in-state, Cole Cabana, a running back from in-state as an offer, Jake Berklinger, also offered by Michigan State. They're getting a lot of offer guys in for this game, Josh, and you're going to be in a hell of an atmosphere. There's not many more fun campuses in the country than Michigan State. Those fans, they know how to have fun. There's going to be a lot of great energy there in the morning for that noon kickoff, man.
Yeah, it's funny when we were looking in preseason, I think you and I may have even talked about this at one point. We were looking at what the biggest recruiting weekends were going to be. Anybody could have said, well, when Michigan comes to town, it's going to be a big weekend for Michigan State. Yeah, but big is relative, Steve. I don't think we even expected those names would be flocking to that campus. It's interesting as we move on, though, because you didn't say something that I'm going to kind of fill in the blanks on. You started to allude to it, though. You started to allude to guys that Michigan State is targeting right now, that if Mel Tucker were to move on, would still consider Mel Tucker, which speaks to kind of the magnetic effect that he has in the recruiting world. But the one we would have talked about, the weekend we would have talked about, is Penn State at Ohio State. Like, that's the big one. It looked like the Big Ten's regular season Super Bowl, even up to a few weeks ago. Penn State's already got a couple of losses now. That's not Ohio State's fault. And they've still got a big recruiting weekend. So what should I be looking for and listening for in Columbus this week?
Well, Michigan State's attracting that kind of talent right now because of the way they're playing. It speaks to Mel Tucker and his staff, but they're performing at a high level on the field. So that's going to bring greater eyes. Ohio State, they always have the 5 stars' eyes on what they're doing and what year in, year out, and the way their guys hear their name called in the NFL draft. Ohio State is the number 4 recruiting class in the country. Obviously, one of the jewels of that one class was Quinn Ewers, who enrolled early, which moved them out of the number 1 spot. They're down to number 4. If you look at average ranking per commit, Josh, it's number 2. So it's one of the most talented classes in the country in both categories. And as they put the finishing touches on this, many of their major targets for the stretch run are on campus this weekend. A couple official visitors, Ernest Green, offensive lineman from California, and Hero Canoe, who hails from Germany, also playing his high school football in California. I think for Canoe, they got to make up ground on Oklahoma, but they can. And for Green, it's Georgia, but they can. This is return visits for both. They love the Buckeyes. Ohio State's got a lot to sell for both of them. They're going to take their swing at Marvin Jones Jr., who's a 5-star caliber defensive lineman from the Sunshine State. I like Oklahoma for Marvin right now. I think Alabama's in an interesting spot. Georgia's trying to make a move. This is a chance to really kind of assess where Ohio State's at after the trip. They probably trail those 3 schools, in my opinion, coming in. You got their top 2 safety targets, Zion Branch and Xavier Wampa. Wampa, the number 1 safety in the top 247. They're coming. I have both crystal ball to Ohio State right now. I like my pick for Branch. I don't hate my pick for Wampa. Notre Dame and Iowa are certainly in it for Wampa. Branch is looking at Clemson, USC, Alabama too. So there's some major programs in the mix for him, but I still like Ohio State for Branch and his little brother, top 247 receiver in the 2023 class, Zachariah Branch, is also visiting. Him and Carnell Tate are Ohio State's top targets at the position in 2023. They're in the thick of it for those guys. But back to 2022, you have 5-star defensive lineman Amari Abor. We had a great visit to A&M last week. I kind of like where Ohio State stands with Abor coming in, not predicting them, but they're in an interesting spot. Caden Curry, who's from the great state of Indiana as well, Indianapolis suburbs, Center Grove, top 10 high school football team in the country right now per Max Preps. He's going to be back. He took his official visit in September. He took an unofficial in the summer. I really like where Ohio State stands for Caden Curry. This visit, his official visit was the Oregon game. It was a noon kick. He had his own game on Friday, made the 3-hour drive down I-70, was super tired by kick, didn't do much fun stuff after the game. So this visit, he'll get that in. He'll hang with players. He'll get to be around the other recruits and have a good night's sleep before going to a night game. So I think that'll be good. 5 stars in the 2023 class, Sonny Styles, they have a great shot at him. Dante Moore, they're in the thick of it for the quarterback from Detroit. Richard Young, the number 1 running back in the country. Ohio State's a major contender there. Troy Bowles, the top 247's number 1 linebacker. I like the Buckeyes for him. Carnell Tate is my crystal ball is on the Buckeyes. Justice Haynes is a top 247 running back from Georgia, Bulldogs legacy. Notre Dame, Clemson, Ohio State, some of the other contenders, Luke Montgomery. Big names. Go to Bucknuts for more of the names if I didn't mention it. But Ohio State's going to land some of those guys. We'll see.
We go to Eugene, Oregon. They beat the Buckeyes earlier this year, and it put Oregon on the radar. Not that they weren't already there. Mario Cristobal and his staff, they've been recruiting outside their minds for the last several years. So much so, Steve, that now, once again, just like James Franklin, just like Mel Tucker, we start to hear Mario Cristobal's name mentioned, albeit maybe at a whisper, but still mentioned for a ton of these job openings. So kind of want to ask you the same question I asked about Mel Tucker. Number 1, just the latest on Oregon recruiting. But number 2, how does that whisper campaign, sometimes we start to hear, how does it affect things? how do you think Mario Cristobal transition? Like, what would it take for him to ever leave there? Because I get a sense it would be a lot harder than maybe we're led to believe publicly.
Well, similar to Mel Tucker and Michigan State having some of these blue chippers with eyes on the Spartans, and those relationships would, wherever Mel goes, those relationships would follow because Coach Tucker does such a good job. Mario Cristobal, I don't know if there's a head coach more engaged in recruiting in America than him. And I think he's got Oregon right on the cusp. I mean, hell, they may make the playoff this year, right, Josh? And so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. He's got another good class. It's ranked number 7th nationally right now, number 1 in the Pac-12 for tracking for a 4th straight year, tracking for a 3rd top 10 class over that span. And this might be his best one yet. And you look at some of the guys that are in the fold, are elite national guys, that, you know, if for whatever, you know, same reason as Mel Tucker, you know, those are guys that I'm sure Coach Cristobal would continue to recruit. But for Oregon, they're right there on the cusp. They got some big visitors this weekend. Cyrus Moss is a guy that Blair Angulo reported. Our colleague could be on campus this weekend. We have Oregon Cristobal there for the special edge rusher. Nigel Kelly's one of the best pass rushers in the Sunshine State. He's took an official to Oregon in June, coming back this weekend for an unofficial. I think Oregon leads right now for Nigel Kelly. Keontae Scott's the number 1 JUCO cornerback in the top 247 rankings. He takes his official visit. He's a guy that could help out right away. Oregon has the fastest linebacker class in the country right now, Josh, with Harrison Taggart and Devin Jackson in the fold already. Lander Barton is a top 247 recruit from Utah. He's taking his official this weekend. Michigan, Texas, and the Utes, my cousin Vinny, are the contenders. But Oregon going to take their swing at Lander Barton this weekend. And it's another special class. Oregon's on the cusp. I think they're close. You know, we'll see how their quarterback room comes together as they move forward. Ty Thompson was a major get for them last year. But I like the way they're building up every other position room. And so if Mario Cristobal is going to leave Oregon, so you know, which is a place that is proven, they've been in the national title game. They've been in 2 playoffs, Josh, or 1. Have they been in? They played Auburn for the title. That was no playoff.
Yeah, just 1 playoff so far.
And then they lost to Ohio State in the title game. But they've had the most success in the Pac-12 by far since the USC dynasty that Pete Carroll had. Oregon's been the most successful team for a long time since then. Coach Cristobal has them on the cusp here, maybe in the playoff this year. We'll see. For him to leave, I mean, I think it would take a special job. Maybe Gainesville would be hard to say no to. Who knows? But I mean, maybe he says no to everything because Oregon's been as close to winning a title as, you know, any program in the country over the last decade or so.
He does not get told no very often in Eugene, Oregon. Anything else, Steve? I'm looking at my plate here. I've cleaned off my plate, but sometimes you got more food on your plate than I have. So anywhere else we need to go? I
got some extra items. Arch Manning, the 5-star quarterback in 2023. You might have heard of him from New Orleans. He's going to be back at Clemson. Clemson was the first visit that he took in the summer when recruits were allowed to get back on campus. And I think that set the tone for what a visit should be like. They just love the people of Clemson. If you go to Clemson, everyone loves being there, man. It is like Pleasantville at Clemson. Everybody is so damn happy to be at Clemson. And Clemson, they have the number 3 pound for pound recruiting class in the country right now in 2022. So people out there trying to write off the Clemson Tigers and saying Clemson's done at, God forbid you be 4-3 after winning 2 titles and being in 5 playoffs. You're done. They'll be fine. They're going to bounce back. They got good players coming. They got good players on the roster. It'll be interesting to see if there's some minor staff changes. But Clemson's got a really good class. And, you know, they're swinging hard on Arch Manning, 5-star AJ Harris, 5-star Peter Woods. Some of the headliners coming in. Big opportunity for Baylor, Josh. You talk much about Baylor. Baylor's 6-1, brother. They got Texas in town. They're number 16 in the country. They got a ton of offered 2023s and 2024s on campus. I don't know. You know, they beat Texas in front of those guys and get to 7-1. And, you know, you're in prime position to maybe win the Big 12. and can Baylor get into the playoff? Is there a path for Baylor to get into the playoff, Josh?
Yeah, well, there's a very, very fine path, but I'll tell you what I just did. I wrote down Baylor, Texas breakdown. So you have convinced me to talk about this on my own show tonight. So you have contributed to the upward mobility of Baylor society in some way.
Oh, how about Dave Aranda? What do you think about Dave Aranda for LSU?
Well, that's the name that keeps on being quiet. And yet, good and well, there have got to be athletic directors out there that have him right at the forefront. So I think Dave Aranda's name is out there every bit as much as he'd like it to be. But as you and I both know, behind the scenes, sometimes it looks a little bit different. So there will be some eyeballs on that Baylor-Texas game that don't have money on the game. They couldn't care less about Baylor recruiting, but probably are very interested in the head coach there at Baylor.
Yeah, man. Notre Dame, number 11, Notre Dame, they get another night game against North Carolina. Touted defensive lineman Jason Moore. Touted quarterback. I think Jackson Arnold's one of the best quarterbacks in the junior class. He's going to visit Notre Dame. They've recruited every position well over the last 4 or 5 cycles for sure. Bucknershman there now. But I love the way they've attacked quarterback recruiting in 2023. They have 7, 8 offers. Maybe I exaggerated that by 1 or 2. But they've offered some really talented guys in 2023, and they're near the top for damn near all of them. So I think that this 2023, I look at as the year that Notre Dame is going to get a special elite guy at quarterback. And if they can keep recruiting at the same level around that, I think they've already proven to be a title contender, but I think that's kind of the missing piece for them. And so Jackson Arnold visiting them this week. And so big couple big weekend visitors for them as well.
Steve Wiltfong, we have exhausted all possible options here. The Wiltfong Recruiting Whiparound, you catch it here every week. You can also keep it locked all week long, every day on 247sports.com for all the latest. Steven, stay warm.
Hey, one person on Twitter asked where Whiparound was this week, so we got to deliver it to the fan.
From us to you. Thank you, Steven.
Take care, y'all.